The planet? It was never trying to kill us, Kexthul said slowly. It was trying to teach us. But we were too focused on proving our strength to learn the lessons. Exactly, Jake said. And now that we understand, Torvani's 9 can become what the architects always intended. A place where different species learn to work together and create something better than any of them could build alone. As the day continued, more alien representatives arrived on the planet's surface. Scientists, diplomats, and even some warriors came to see what Jake had accomplished. Each one left amazed by what they had experienced. But the most important arrival came just as the suns were setting. A familiar ship descended through the atmosphere with perfect control, landing in the Yasjo, designated area Jake had prepared. The U's Horizon had arrived, carrying Amy Parker and the first wave of human colonists. Jake ran to meet the ship as Amy stepped out onto the surface of Torvani's 9. She was wearing a simple breathing mask instead of a full environmental suit, something that would have been impossible just a month before. "Jake," Amy called out, her voice filled with joy and amazement. "We monitored everything from orbit. What you have accomplished here is incredible. You have not just survived, you have created a miracle." Jake hugged his friend, feeling happier than he had ever been. "It was not just me," he said. "It was all of us, humans, aliens, and the native creatures of this world. We worked together to create something new." Amy looked around at the settlement, her scientist's mind already cataloging all the wonders she was seeing. "The atmospheric readings are amazing," she said. "The gravity is stable. The radiation levels are normal. How did you do it?" "I will show you everything," Jake promised. "But first, there is something I need to do." Jake walked to the center of the settlement, where representatives from dozens of alien species had gathered. Admiral Kexthul stood beside him, no longer as an enemy, but as a witness to what had been accomplished. 30 days ago, I came to this world as a test," Jake announced. "Today, I declare that test complete. But I have more to say." Jake looked up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, the Galactic Council was waiting to hear the results of his trial. "I claimed Torvani's 9 not just as a human colony, but as a new kind of world," he said. "A world where any species can come to learn and grow. A world where cooperation is more important than conquest. A world where we can all work together to build something better than any of us could create alone." The alien representatives looked at each other, then back at Jake. Admiral Kexthul stepped forward. "By the terms of our agreement," Kexthul said formally, "you have more than met the requirements of the trial. Humanity has earned full membership in the Galactic Council and all the rights and privileges that come with it." The alien representatives began making sounds of agreement. Some applauded in their own ways. Others made musical tones or flashing lights. All of them were acknowledging what Jake had accomplished, but Kexthul was not finished. However, he continued, "I believe we must go further than our original agreement. What has been accomplished here deserves greater recognition." The Draconian Admiral turned to address the entire gathering. "I propose that Torvani's 9 be designated as the first cooperative world of the Galactic Council, a place where any species can come to learn about working together. A living example of what we can accomplish when we choose cooperation over conflict." The response was immediate and positive. The alien representatives agreed that Jake's settlement should become a model for other worlds. Torvani's 9 would be the first planet specifically dedicated to interspecies cooperation and learning. As the celebration continued into the night, Jake walked to the edge of the settlement where Scout and her pack of phase wolves were resting. The largest wolf looked up at him with intelligent eyes that seemed to sparkle with satisfaction. "We did it, Scout," Jake said softly, scratching behind the wolf's ears. "We turned a world of death into a world of life." Scout made a soft whining sound that Jake had learned meant agreement. The other wolves in the pack gathered around them, creating a circle of friendship and protection. Jake looked back at his settlement, where humans and aliens were working together to unpack supplies and plan for the future. Children's laughter echoed through the streets. The first human children who would grow up on Torvani's 9, learning from birth that cooperation was more powerful than conflict. Above them, the crystal trees sang their evening song, but now it was a song of welcome and celebration. The planet that had once been humanity's greatest challenge had become their greatest triumph. Jake Morrison had not just survived the trial. He had transformed it into the foundation of a new future for all species in the galaxy. Torvani's 9 was no longer the trial planet. It was home, and it was only the beginning. "This is Jake Morrison on Torvani's 9, he said. "The trial is nearly complete, but I need to tell you something important. This planet is not just a test. It is a gift. Torvani's 9 has resources, knowledge, and opportunities that could benefit every species in the galaxy. But more than that, it has taught me something about what it means to be truly civilized." Jake paused, looking out at the settlement he had built. Phase wolves played in the streets, alongside small maintenance robots. Wraith vines grew up the sides of buildings, creating beautiful patterns of living art. In the distance, sentinels stood guard over the growing community. "I am not just surviving here," Jake continued. "I am building a home. A home for humans, yes, but also for the native species of this world. We are not conquerors here. We are partners." The response from the monitoring fleet was immediate and confused. Admiral Kexthul's voice came through the communication system, sounding angry and disbelieving. "Explain yourself, human," Kexthul demanded. "What do you mean you are building a home? The test is for survival, not colonization." Jake smiled. "The test was to establish a permanent settlement," he said. "That is exactly what I have done. But I have done more than that. I have proven that Torvani's 9 can be a world where different species work together instead of fighting each other." Over the next 2 days, Jake guided representatives from several alien species down to the planet's surface. This was something that had never been possible before. Previous visitors had either died quickly or been driven insane by the planet's hostile environment. But under Jake's guidance, the aliens were able to walk safely through areas that had once been certain death. The alien representatives saw the settlement Jake had built. They met the sentinels, who spoke to them about the architect's vision for cooperation between species. They watched phase wolves playing with human children who existed only in Jake's imagination, but who would be real someday soon. Most importantly, they felt what Jake had felt. The sense that Torvani's 9 was not trying to destroy them. It was trying to teach them. Admiral Kexthul was the most skeptical of the visitors. He walked through Jake's settlement with his weapons ready, expecting danger at every turn. But the danger never came. The planet that had killed so many warriors welcomed him peacefully. "How is this possible?" Kexthul asked Jake as they stood in the center of the settlement. "This world was designed to be unconquerable. How did you tame it?" Jake shook his head. "I did not tame it," he said. "I learned to understand it. Torvani's 9 was never our enemy. It was our teacher. It was waiting for someone to approach it with curiosity instead of aggression, with cooperation instead of conquest." On day 28, Jake received a message that filled him with excitement. It was from Amy Parker aboard the monitoring ship, UES Horizon. "Jake," Amy's voice said through the communication system, "I have news. Earth has approved your request. The first wave of colonists is already on their way. We will arrive in 6 months with everything needed to expand your settlement into a real city." Jake looked around at the world he had helped to create. Torvani's 9 was no longer the trial planet. It was becoming humanity's newest home. But more than that, it was becoming a model for how different species could work together to create something better than any of them could build alone. He had not just passed the test. He had changed what the test meant. The alien observers watching from orbit could hardly believe what they had witnessed. In less than 30 days, Jake Morrison had transformed the most dangerous world in the galaxy into a place of hope and cooperation. He had proven that humans possessed something the other species had overlooked, the ability to see potential where others saw only problems. As Jake prepared for the final day of his trial, he knew that his real work was just beginning. Torvani's 9 was ready to become humanity's home among the stars. But it would also be something more. It would be proof that the future belonged not to the strongest or the smartest species, but to those who could learn to work together. Day 30 arrived with the most beautiful sunrise Jake had ever seen on Torvani's 9. The 3 suns of the system painted the sky in colors that had no names. The crystal trees sang their morning song, but now it sounded like music instead of screaming. The phase wolves stretched and yawned in the warm light. Completely relaxed in their new home. Jake stood on the highest platform of his settlement, looking out over the valley that had become humanity's first successful colony beyond Earth. In just 1 month, he had turned a world of death into a world of life. But more than that, he had proven something important about what humans could accomplish when they approached problems with open minds and willing hearts. His communication device buzzed with an incoming message. It was Admiral Kexthul calling from the monitoring fleet in orbit. Jake Morrison, the Draconian's voice said. Jake could hear something different in the alien's tone. The anger and contempt were gone, replaced by something that might have been respect. Today marks the end of your trial. By the terms of our agreement, you are required to survive for 30 days and establish a permanent settlement. Have you succeeded? Jake smiled as he looked out over his thriving community. Sentinels patrolled the outer edges, no longer as guards against him, but as protectors of the settlement. Phase wolves played in the streets with maintenance robots. Wraith vines grew up the sides of buildings, creating living walls that helped regulate temperature and air quality. I have done more than survive, Admiral, Jake said. I have made Torvani's 9 into humanity's new home. But I have also discovered something that I think will interest the Galactic Council very much. There was a pause before Kexthul responded. Explain. This planet was never meant to be a trial by combat, Jake said. It was designed by the architects as a test of wisdom and cooperation. Every species that came here before approached it as a battle to be won. But Torvani's 9 was waiting for someone who would approach it as a partnership to be built. Jake activated the settlement's main communication array, which was powered by the planet's natural energy systems. His voice was now being broadcast to every ship in the monitoring fleet, and through them to the entire Galactic Council. I am not just claiming survival, Jake announced. I am claiming Torvani's 9 as humanity's first colony world. But more than that, I am offering this world as a new model for how different species can work together. Torvani's 9 is ready to welcome visitors and settlers from every race in the galaxy, as long as they come in peace and friendship. The response was immediate and chaotic. Jake could hear dozens of alien voices talking at once through the communication channel. Some sounded amazed, others sounded angry or disbelieving. But all of them sounded shocked. Admiral Kexthul's voice cut through the noise. Impossible, he said. No one can make Torvani's 9 safe for casual visitors. The planet kills anything that lands on it. Not anymore, Jake replied. Let me show you. Over the next few hours, Jake did something that no one had ever thought possible. He guided ships from the monitoring fleet down to the planet's surface, one at a time. Each landing was smooth and safe, thanks to the guidance systems Jake had. Set up using the architect technology, The alien visitors walked through Jake's settlement in amazement. They saw creatures that had been described as mindless killers now serving as friendly guardians and guides. They breathed air that had been toxic just weeks before. They walked on ground where the gravity was stable and predictable. Most importantly, they felt welcome. The planet that had once radiated hostility and danger now felt like a place where they could live and work in peace. Admiral Kexthal was among the last to land. The massive draconian warrior stepped out of his shuttle with his weapons ready, still expecting danger. But as he walked through the settlement, his weapons slowly lowered. "How?" was all he could say as he watched a phase wolf playing gently with one of Jake's maintenance robots. "I listened," Jake said simply. "I learned. I cooperated instead of conquering. And I discovered that Torvani's 9 was never our enemy. It was our teacher." Jake led Kexthal to the central square of the settlement, where the architect ruins had been carefully preserved and integrated into the new construction. The ancient crystals glowed with warm, welcoming light. "The architects built this world to test potential," Jake explained. "Not the potential for violence or domination, but the potential for growth and cooperation. Every challenge on this planet was designed to teach a lesson about working together instead of fighting." Kexthal placed one clawed hand on one of the architect crystals. His eyes widened as images and knowledge flowed into his mind. Jake watched as the proud warrior's understanding of Torvani's 9 completely changed. The change in Jake's situation became obvious over the next few days. Animals that had been hostile before now avoided him peacefully, or even seemed curious about him. The wraithvines no longer tried to attack him when he walked through their territory. Even the gravity storms seemed less violent, as if the planet was becoming gentler with him. Jake realized that Torvani's 9 was responding to his changed attitude. The planet had been testing him, and he was starting to pass the tests. On day 15, Jake encountered a pack of creatures he had never seen before. They looked like wolves, but their fur seemed to be made of the same phasing material as the wraithvines. They could appear and disappear at will, making them nearly impossible to track or predict. These were phase wolves, and they were some of the most dangerous predators on Torvani's 9. Jake had read reports of them hunting in coordinated packs, appearing and disappearing to confuse their prey before moving in for the kill. But when Jake met them, something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, the largest wolf approached him slowly. It sniffed at him carefully, then sat down and looked at him with intelligent eyes. Jake realized that the wolf was not seeing him as prey. It was seeing him as something else. Maybe another predator to be respected. Maybe even a potential pack member. Jake had an idea. He sat down too, making himself less threatening. He moved slowly and kept his hands visible. He tried to project calm and peaceful intentions, the same way he had with the sentinels. After a long, tense moment, the wolf moved closer. Jake held out his hand, letting the creature sniff him. The wolf's nose was cold and wet, just like a dog's nose back on Earth. Other wolves in the pack began to appear around them. Jake sat very still as they investigated him. He could feel their intelligence as they decided whether he was friend or foe. Finally, the pack leader made a decision. It lay down next to Jake, close enough to touch. The other wolves settled down as well, forming a circle around him. Jake had just been accepted by one of Torvani's 9's most dangerous predator species. Over the remaining days of his second week, Jake learned to work with the phase wolves. They showed him hidden paths through the dangerous areas of the planet. They warned him about approaching gravity storms and time distortions. In return, Jake shared his food with him and used his technology to help them hunt more effectively. Relationship was beneficial for both sides. Jake got protection and guidance from creatures that knew the planet better than any visitor ever could. The wolves got access to new hunting techniques and resources they had never had before. By day 18, Jake was no longer just surviving on Torvani's 9. He was thriving. He had allies among the native creatures. He understood the planet's systems and cycles. He had access to ancient knowledge and technology left by the architects. Most importantly, he had learned the planet's greatest secret. Torvani's 9 was not meant to be conquered. It was meant to be understood. And once you understood it, it could become the most wonderful home in the galaxy. The aliens watching from orbit could hardly believe what they were seeing. Jake Morrison had done something no warrior from any species had ever accomplished. He had made peace with the trial planet, and there were still 12 days left in his test. Jake woke up on day 19 to find something amazing. The phase wolves had brought him a gift during the night. It was a piece of crystal, unlike any he had seen before. This crystal was perfectly clear and warm to the touch. When he held it up to the light, it seemed to contain swirling patterns that moved like living things. The largest wolf, who Jake had started calling Scout, pushed the crystal toward him with her nose. She made a low whining sound that Jake had learned meant important or pay attention. Jake examined the crystal more carefully. It was similar to the ones in the architect ruins, but this one felt different, more alive, more responsive. When he touched it, images filled his mind, but these were not memories from the past. These were possibilities for the future. Jake saw Torvani's 9 as it could be. The toxic atmosphere could be filtered and cleaned. The unstable gravity could be harnessed as a source of endless energy. The time distortions could be used to accelerate plant growth or slow down dangerous processes. The hostile creatures could become partners and guardians. The crystal was showing him that Torvani's 9 was not just a test. It was a gift, a world with incredible potential, waiting for someone smart enough to unlock it. Jake spent the morning exploring with Scout and her pack. The wolves led him to places he had never seen before, hidden valleys where the air was cleaner, underground caves filled with fresh water, gardens where edible plants grew in the filtered light of the crystal formations. In one of these hidden valleys, Jake found something that made his heart race with excitement. It was a machine, obviously built by the architects, but this one was different from the others. While most of the ancient technology seemed designed for teaching and testing, this machine looked like it was built for changing things. Jake approached it carefully. The machine was shaped like a flower made of metal and crystal. Its petals were closed, but as Jake got closer, they began to open slowly. Light poured out from the center, and Jake could feel power humming through the ground beneath his feet. It was a terraforming device, a machine designed to change the environment of an entire planet. Jake placed his hand on the machine's central crystal. Immediately, his mind was filled with information about how it worked. The device could clean the atmosphere by filtering out toxic gases and replacing them with breathable air. It could stabilize the gravity by creating energy fields that balanced the planet's natural forces. It could even reduce the harmful effects of the time distortions by creating zones where time flowed normally. But the machine would not work for just anyone. It required cooperation. It needed to be operated by someone who understood the planet, someone who had proven they could work with Torvani's 9 instead of against it. Jake realized that this was the real test. Not just surviving for 30 days, but proving that he could be trusted with the power to reshape an entire world. Over the next few days, Jake began working with the terraforming machine. But he did not try to change Torvani's 9 into a copy of Earth. Instead, he worked to help the planet become the best version of itself. He used the machine to clear the air in certain areas, creating breathable zones where humans could live without environmental suits. But he left other areas unchanged, preserving the unique ecosystem that the native creatures needed. He stabilized the gravity in the places where he planned to build, but he left the gravity storms in other regions. The storms were part of the planet's natural cycle, and many creatures depended on them. Most importantly, he made sure that every change he made improved life for both humans and the native species. The phase wolves got new hunting grounds. The wraith vines got better soil for their root networks. Even the sentinels got upgraded power sources for their ancient systems. Jake was not conquering Torvani's 9. He was joining it. By day 25. Jake had accomplished something that amazed even himself. He had built the foundation of a real settlement. Using a combination of human engineering, architect technology, and the planet's own natural systems, he had created a small city that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. The buildings were made from the living crystal that grew naturally on the planet. They changed color with the light and could repair themselves if damaged. The streets were lined with plants that cleaned the air and provided food. Water flowed through channels that followed the natural curves of the land. The settlement had power from the gravity storms and the planet's natural energy fields. It had protection from the sentinels, who had agreed to guard the city in exchange for help maintaining their own systems. It had early warning systems provided by the native animals, who could sense dangers long before any human technology could detect them. Most importantly, the settlement was not just a place for humans to live. It was designed as a home for multiple species. The phase walls had dens built into the foundations. The wraith vines had gardens where they could tend their seeds. Even the crystal trees had spaces where they could spread their roots and grow. Jake had created the first truly integrated community on Torvan's -9. On day 26, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He activated the planet's long-range communication system, a network of crystal transmitters that the architects had built to send messages across the galaxy. His message was simple, but it reached every ship in the monitoring fleet orbiting above. On the 5th day, Jake made his first real breakthrough. He was studying some of the crystal formations when he realized they were not just rocks. They were some kind of technology left behind by whoever had built this world. The crystals responded to touch and seemed to be connected to each other in a vast network. When Jake placed his hand on one of the crystals, he felt a strange sensation, like someone whispering in his mind. The whisper was not in any language he knew, but somehow he understood part of it. The crystal was trying to communicate with him. Jake spent hours experimenting with the crystals. He discovered that they could show him maps of the local area. They could warn him about approaching dangers. Most amazingly, they seemed to recognize that he was not like the other visitors who had come to this world before. Previous visitors had come as warriors, trying to conquer the planet through strength and violence. But Jake was approaching Torvani's 9 as a puzzle to be solved, not an enemy to be defeated. The crystals seemed to respond better to this attitude. By the end of his first week on Torvani's 9, Jake had not just survived. He had begun to understand the planet's strange ecosystem. He had learned to work with its dangers instead of fighting against them. And most importantly, he had started to feel like this place could actually become a home. The aliens watching from orbit were amazed. No one had ever lasted this long on Torvani's 9. They expected Jake to be dead or insane by now. Instead, his daily reports showed a human who was not just surviving, but learning and adapting. Jake Morrison was proving that humans had something the other species lacked. They had the ability to see opportunity where others saw only death. Jake had been on Torvani's 9 for 8 days when he met the Sentinels. He was exploring a canyon filled with floating rocks when he heard the sound of heavy metal footsteps echoing off the canyon walls. The sound was rhythmic and purposeful, like a giant machine walking with determination. Jake hid behind one of the floating rocks and watched as 3 massive robots marched into view. Each one was twice as tall as a human, and built like a walking fortress. Their bodies were made of the same crystal material as the trees, but darker and more solid. Red lights glowed where their eyes should be, and energy weapons were built into their arms. These were the sentinels that Jake had read about in the briefing files. They were guardians left behind by the ancient race that had built Torvani's 9. Every warrior who had come to this planet before had eventually faced them. None had survived the encounter. The sentinels moved through the canyon like they were searching for something. Their red eyes swept back and forth, scanning every rock. And Shadow. Jake knew they were looking for him. The question was, should he run, or should he try something different? Jake had learned a lot about this planet in his first week. He had discovered that Torvani's 9 responded to emotions and intentions. When he approached problems with curiosity, instead of fear, the planet seemed less hostile. When he tried to understand instead of conquer, the dangers became more manageable. Maybe the same approach would work with the sentinels. Jake stepped out from behind the floating rock. The 3 robots immediately turned toward him, their weapons beginning to glow with deadly energy. But instead of raising his own weapons or running away, Jake did something that no previous visitor had ever tried. He raised his hands in a peaceful gesture and spoke to them. "I am not here to fight you," Jake said. His translator device worked to change his words into different languages, hoping the sentinels might understand one of them. "I am here to learn." The sentinels stopped moving. Their weapons were still charged and ready, but they did not fire. Jake could see lights blinking on their heads as they processed what he had said. One of the sentinels spoke. Its voice was deep and metallic, like the sound of grinding gears. "All visitors come to conquer," it said in a language that Jake's translator barely recognized. "All visitors come to prove strength through violence. Why do you speak of learning?" Jake felt his heart racing, but he tried to keep his voice calm and steady. "Because I think this planet was not meant to be conquered," he said. "I think it was meant to teach something. I want to understand what that lesson is." The sentinels looked at each other. Jake could see more lights blinking on their bodies as they communicated in some way he could not understand. After a long moment, the lead sentinel lowered its weapons. "No visitor has spoken these words before," it said. "You interest us, small being. We will not destroy you today, but you must prove your words with actions." The sentinels walked away, leaving Jake alone in the canyon with a racing heart and sweaty palms. He had just survived an encounter that had killed every previous challenger. But more than that, he had opened a line of communication with the planet's guardians. Over the next few days, Jake continued his explorations with new confidence. He began to see patterns everywhere on Torvani's 9. The gravity storms followed the movements of the planet's 3 moons. The time distortion fields were stronger near underground water sources. The wraith vines were actually part of a larger ecosystem that helped the crystal trees spread their seeds. Everything on this world was connected. Everything had a purpose. Jake also discovered that the planet was teaching him. Each challenge he faced was like a test, but not the kind of test that was meant to destroy him. It was the kind of test that was meant to help him grow and learn new skills. The extreme gravity was making his muscles stronger. The toxic atmosphere was forcing him to become more efficient with his resources. The strange time effects were teaching him to be more aware of cause and effect. Even the hostile creatures were showing him new ways to think about survival and adaptation. On day 12, Jake found the ruins. He was following a river of liquid that was not quite water when he saw structures rising from the landscape ahead. They were made of the same crystal material as everything else on the planet, but these crystals were arranged in geometric patterns that were clearly artificial. Tall spires reached toward the sky, connected by bridges that seemed to float in mid-air without any visible support. This was a city built by the architects. The ancient race that had created Torvan is -9. Jake approached the ruins carefully. He had learned to be cautious about new discoveries on this world. But as he got closer, he felt a strange sense of welcome, as if the city itself was happy to see him. The buildings were empty, but they were not dead. Lights began to glow as Jake walked through the streets. Machines that had been sleeping for thousands of years began to hum with power. It was as if the city was waking up just for him. In the center of the city, Jake found a building that was different from the others. It was smaller and more organic in shape, like it had grown, rather. Been built. Inside, he discovered a room filled with crystals that pulsed with soft, warm light. When Jake touched one of the crystals, his mind was suddenly filled with images and knowledge. He saw the architects as they had been when they were alive. They were tall, graceful beings with skin that looked like living starlight. They had built Torvani's 9 not as a weapon or a prison, but as a school. The planet was designed to test potential. Not the potential for violence or conquest, but the potential for growth, adaptation, and understanding. The architects had believed that truly advanced civilizations needed to prove they could learn and change, not just fight and destroy. Every challenge on Torvani's 9 was meant to teach a lesson. The gravity storms taught patience and observation. The time distortions taught respect for cause and effect. The hostile creatures taught cooperation and creative thinking. The sentinels taught that communication was often better than violence. But most importantly, the planet taught that every environment, no matter how hostile it seemed, could become a home if approached with the right attitude. Jake spent hours in the crystal room, absorbing the knowledge the architects had left behind. He learned about the planet's systems and how they worked. He discovered hidden resources and safe areas that were not marked on any map. He found out how to communicate more effectively with the crystals, and even with some of the native creatures. When he finally left the ruins, Jake felt like a different person. He was no longer just trying to survive on Torvani's 9. He was beginning to understand how to live here. Jake's small ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Torvani's 9. The planet looked angry from space, covered in swirling clouds that flashed with strange colors. Lightning that was not quite lightning danced between the clouds. The ship's computer kept making warning sounds as it tried to find a safe place to land. "Landing zone analysis complete," the computer said in its calm voice. "Warning, all potential landing sites show extreme danger levels. Gravity readings are unstable. Atmospheric composition is toxic to human life. Recommend immediate departure." "Override safety protocols," Jake said. "Find the best spot you can and put me down." The ship fell through the thick, burning air. Jake could smell something like rotten eggs even through his life support systems. The gravity hit him like a hammer as they got closer to the surface. He felt like someone had put heavy weights on his chest. His arms and legs suddenly felt twice as heavy as normal. The landing was rough. Jake's ship crashed through what looked like a forest, but the trees were made of some kind of crystal that sang when the wind touched them. The ship finally stopped moving when it hit a hill covered in purple grass that moved even though there was no wind. Jake sat in his pilot's seat for a moment, trying to catch his breath. The gravity here was much stronger than on Earth. Every movement took extra effort. He checked his suit systems. The air outside would kill him in minutes without protection. The radiation levels were high enough to cook him slowly. And according to his sensors, there were life forms moving around outside. Big life forms. Jake activated his communication system and sent a message back to the monitoring ships that were watching from orbit. "This is Jake Morrison. I have landed safely on Torvani's 9, beginning survival test now." He did not mention that his ship was damaged and would not be able to take off again. That was not important anymore. He was here for 30 days, and he planned to stay for 30 days. Jake put on his environmental suit and checked his gear. Amy Parker had given him the best equipment they had. A portable shelter that could set up automatically. Water purification. Tablets. Food that would last for weeks. A medical kit. Weapons for protection. And most importantly, a beacon that would let the aliens watching know he was still alive. He opened the hatch and stepped outside. The first thing that hit him was the sound. The crystal trees made music, but it was not pleasant music. It sounded like screaming mixed with the sound of breaking glass. The purple grass under his feet made squelching noises as if he was walking on something that was still alive. The second thing he noticed was how everything seemed to move in ways that hurt his eyes. Objects would be in one place, then suddenly appear somewhere else without moving through the space between. The horizon kept changing shape. Sometimes it looked close enough to touch. Other times it seemed infinitely far away. Jake had read about this in the reports. Torvani's 9 did not follow the normal rules of physics. Space and time worked differently here. It was one of the things that drove visitors crazy. He started walking away from his crashed ship, looking for a place to set up his shelter. The heavy gravity made every step difficult, but Jake had trained for this. He had spent months in high gravity chambers, building up his strength. That was when he saw his first native creature. It looked like a vine at first, growing between two crystal trees. But as Jake got closer, the vine started to move toward him. Then it disappeared completely, only to reappear right next to his leg. Jake jumped back, his heart racing. The vine was not really a vine. It was some kind of creature that could appear and disappear at will. It had thorns along its length that looked sharp enough to cut through his environmental suit. As he watched, more of them began appearing around him. Jake had read about these in the briefing files. They were called wraith vines. They could phase in and out of normal space, making them almost impossible to fight. Warriors from dozens of species had died trying to battle them. They seemed to be attracted to movement and body heat, but Jake noticed something interesting. The creatures kept appearing and disappearing in a pattern. They would phase out for exactly 3 seconds, then phase back in for 5 seconds. It was like they were following some kind of natural rhythm. Jake also noticed that they seemed more solid when they were near his equipment. His suit had electrical systems running through it. His weapons used energy cells. The creatures became more real when they were close to anything that used electricity. This gave Jake an idea. Instead of trying to fight the wraith vines, he started experimenting. He took out a small emergency flare and activated it. The creatures immediately became more solid, more real. They could not phase out as easily when the flare was burning. Jake smiled inside his helmet. These creatures were not magic. They were just using some kind of natural ability that was affected by electromagnetic fields. If he could control the fields, he could control when they could and could not phase. He activated his suit's emergency beacon, the one that was supposed to signal for rescue. But instead of calling for help, he overcharged it until it started giving off a strong electromagnetic pulse. The wraith vines suddenly became completely solid. They writhed on the ground. Unable to disappear, Jake quickly moved away from them while they were stuck in normal space. He found a spot between 2 large crystal formations and set up his shelter. The electromagnetic pulse had worked, but it had also drained a lot of power from his suit. He would have to be more careful next time. As the first day turned into night, Jake discovered that Torvani's 9 had more surprises waiting for him. The temperature dropped so fast that ice began forming on his suit. But the ice was not normal ice. It moved like it was alive, trying to crawl up his arms and legs toward his helmet. Jake used his suit's heating elements to melt the ice before it could reach his life support systems. He made notes in his log about everything he had learned. The planet was dangerous, but it followed rules. Strange rules, but rules nonetheless. If he could figure out the rules, he could survive. The second day brought new challenges. Jake woke up to find that his shelter had moved during the night. Not just a little bit, but several hundred meters from where he had set it up. The ground itself seemed to flow like water when he was not looking at it. He also discovered the gravity storms that the briefing files had mentioned. Without warning, the gravity would suddenly increase to 3 or 4 times what it had been. Jake had to lie flat on the ground and wait for the storm to pass. If he had been standing when it hit, the sudden increase in weight might have broken his bones. But Jake was learning. He noticed that small animals on the planet seemed to know when the gravity storms were coming. They would hide in burrows or under the crystal trees just before the storms hit. If he watched the animals, he could get warning too. On the third day, Jake encountered something that almost broke his mind. He was walking through a valley when he saw himself walking toward him from the other direction. It was like looking in a mirror, except the other Jake was walking backward and seemed to be getting younger as he moved. This was one of the time distortion fields that made Torvani's 9 so dangerous. Jake quickly backed away from his other self. He had read that getting too close to your own time-distorted image could trap you in a temporal loop forever. But even this strange phenomenon followed patterns. The time field seemed to be stronger near certain types of rock formations. They pulsed with a regular rhythm, like a heartbeat. If Jake was careful and watched for the signs, he could avoid them. By the 4th day, Jake had developed a routine. He would wake up and check the behavior of the local animals to predict gravity storms. He would use his equipment's electromagnetic fields to keep the wraith vines solid and harmless. He would avoid the areas where time flowed differently. Most importantly, he had stopped thinking of the planet as his enemy. Torvani's 9 was dangerous, but it was not evil. It was just a place with different rules. Jake had grown up on Earth, where different places had different dangers. Deserts were hot and dry. Oceans could drown you. Mountains had thin air. But people learned to live in all these places by understanding what made them dangerous and adapting to those dangers. Torvani's 9 was just another environment to understand and adapt to. The meeting room on Galactic Council Station Omega 7 was huge. Jake Morrison sat in a chair that was too small for him, looking around at the alien beings that filled the space. These creatures came from dozens of different worlds across the galaxy. Some were tall and covered in scales. Others looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the light. A few were just clouds of gas that floated above special platforms. Jake felt out of place. He was human, and humans were new to this galactic community. Most of the aliens did not think much of his species. They saw humans as weak and stupid. Jake could feel their eyes on him as he shifted in his uncomfortable seat. The meeting had been going on for hours. The aliens talked about trade routes and mining rights. They discussed wars on distant planets and peace treaties that Jake did not understand. His translator device worked hard to change their strange languages into words he could hear, but some meanings still got lost. Admiral Kexthul was the largest being in the room. He was a draconian, which meant he looked like a giant lizard that could walk on 2 legs. His scales were dark green, and his yellow eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough like grinding rocks. "These humans," Kexthul said, pointing one clawed finger at Jake. "They claim they belong here with us. But what have they done to prove it? Nothing. They are soft creatures from a small world. They have no great victories. They have not conquered terrible enemies or survived impossible tests." Other aliens in the room began to make sounds. Some were like clicking noises. Others were musical. Tones. Jake's translator told him these were sounds of agreement. The beings around him were nodding their heads or moving their bodies in ways that meant yes. Jake wanted to speak up, but he knew he had to be careful. One wrong word could make things worse for all humans. Earth had spent years trying to join this galactic community. If he messed up now, his entire species might be thrown out and left. Alone in space. "What do you suggest, Admiral?" asked another voice. This came from a Valdorian, one of the crystal beings. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Kexthul's mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth. Jake thought the alien might be smiling, but it did not look friendly. "I suggest a test," Kexthul said. "A real test that will show us what these humans are made of. Let one of them try to survive on Torvani's 9. The room became very quiet. Jake heard only the soft humming of the station's air systems and the distant sound of ships moving outside. Every alien eye turned to look at him. Jake had heard of Torvani's 9 before. It was called the Trial Planet. Ancient beings had built it long ago as the ultimate test for warriors. The planet was designed to kill anyone who landed on it. The gravity was so strong it could crush bones. The air was poison. Strange creatures lived there that could drive visitors crazy just by looking at them. Worst of all, time itself worked differently on that world. A person could age years in just minutes. Many great warriors have tried to survive on Torvani's 9. Kexthal continued. Champions from the strongest species in our galaxy have failed. The planet has never been conquered. No one has ever lasted more than a few days. Another alien spoke up. This one was from a race called the Netheri. They looked like purple clouds of gas with glowing spots that might have been eyes. What would be the terms of this test? The Netheri asked. "Simple," Kexthul said. "One human volunteer goes to Torvani's 9. They must not just survive for 30 days. They must build a permanent settlement. If they succeed, humans get full membership in our council. They also get mining rights to 3 rich star systems. If they fail... double quotes, he paused and looked directly at Jake. Humans leave our space forever. Jake felt his heart beating fast. This was not just about him anymore. This was about the future of his entire species. Earth needed the resources and protection that came with council membership. Without it, humanity would always be alone and weak in a dangerous galaxy. The human delegation had 3 people. Besides Jake, there was Amy Parker, who studied alien life forms, and an older diplomat named Carl Rogers. Carl looked worried. His face had gone pale, and he was shaking his head slowly. "This is not reasonable," Carl said. "No species should have to face such an impossible task. Torvani's 9 is not a test. It is an execution." "Then humans are free to refuse," Kexthul replied. "But if you do, this council will vote on your membership today. I think we all know how that vote will go." Jake looked around the room. He could see the truth in the alien faces around him. They did not want humans in their council. This test was just a way to get rid of his species without looking cruel. They thought no human could possibly survive 30 days on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. But Jake had an idea that maybe they were wrong. Humans were not the strongest or smartest species. They did not have the best technology or the most powerful weapons, but they had something else. They could adapt. They could find ways to survive in places where others could not. Earth itself had taught them this. His home world was full of different environments, from burning deserts to frozen poles. Humans had learned to live in all of them. "I will do it," Jake said. The room exploded with noise. Aliens made sounds of surprise and disbelief. Carl Rogers grabbed Jake's arm. "You cannot be serious," Carl whispered. "This is suicide. We need to find another way." But Jake had made up his mind. He stood up, which was hard to do in the strong gravity of the station. All the alien eyes focused on him again. "I volunteer to go to Torvani's 9, Jake said loudly. "I accept the terms of the test." Kekstul's yellow eyes narrowed. "You understand what you are agreeing to? This is not a game, human. The planet will try to kill you in every way possible. You will face things that would destroy the minds of our greatest warriors." "I understand," Jake replied. "When do I leave?" Amy Parker stood up beside him. She was a scientist, not a warrior, but Jake could see courage in her eyes. "I want to help prepare him," she said. "Give him the best equipment we have. Study everything we know about the planet." Kekstul made a sound that might have been laughter. "Of course, we will give your champion 3 days to prepare. Then he goes to Torvani's 9 alone. The test begins when he lands." As the meeting ended and aliens began to file out of the room, Jake wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. But it was too late to change his mind now. In 3 days, he would be on his way to the most dangerous world in the galaxy. The future of humanity would depend on whether he could do something no other being had ever done before. He looked out through the station's large windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there was Torvani's 9, waiting for him. Jake Morrison, a simple human from Earth, was about to face the ultimate test. He just hoped he was ready for what was coming.